What is personalization and why is it so important with advances in AI? And how do we engineer it without introducing bias? All questions to be answered in this, the 10th episode of Plaintalks. A huge thanks to each and every one of you for your support. And to celebrate this milestone of the 10th episode, I'm bringing two friends to join me to discuss this interesting topic. First and foremost, I'd like to introduce a great friend and mentor, Shubham Marish. Shubham, a big welcome to Plaintalks.
Hey, great. Thank you for having me, Tarv, and big fan, so thanks.
Thanks for being with us. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So in my day job is working at Mars as the vice president in their digital team, but I'm moonlighting today as a participant here, but happy to be here.
Next, I would like to introduce our second guest, an amazing individual and also a great friend, Rajiv Chandrasekharan. Rajiv, welcome to Plaintalks.
Thank you, Tar. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being with us. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, hello everyone. I'm Rajiv Chandrasekharan. I'm the CEO of an AI company called Quantum Data Technologies. We've been building solutions using AI and machine learning for a lot of our enterprise clients. I've been a big fan of Tar and his blogs so far, so I'm happy to participate in this. Thank you, Tar.
Thanks, Rajiv. And thank you both for being here today. So guys, what is personalization?
Personalization at a high level is the science of presenting a consumer or a customer with a product or service that's tailored to their specific likes or dislikes, right? So, and the objective being the customer is getting something that they like, and at the same time, the seller of this product or is essentially getting some value back because they're getting a satisfied customer. So how do you do that more scientifically? That's the science of personalization.
I'm just going to quote Wikipedia. It says personalization consists of tailoring, to Rajiv's point, a service or a product to accommodate specific individuals, sometimes groups or segments of individuals. So that's the definition from Wikipedia. And I think in the popular press, tailoring and customization of that product or service, usually means leveraging this information that you have about that individual to tailor. But in my opinion, tailoring could also be, the delivery of choices that consumers can pick from and bundle themselves. So personalization doesn't have to be a fully baked, fully personalized product, service, or experience. It could even be an ecosystem of choices that people can easily choose from to personalize. So who does the personalization? I think, could be an interesting angle to this as well.
Okay, so building on that definition, where we talk about choices and talking about science, I want to know how it relates to artificial intelligence. As you know, Plaintalks is all about simplifying AI. Is personalization something that exists now because of artificial intelligence, or personalization has always existed, but artificial intelligence has made it even more important?
Yeah, and I think that's where, getting to a definition matters. So as an example, if let's say, a plumber comes to work at your house and they're a regular, they've come here before and they know you like chocolates and they bring a bar of chocolates, would you not say, wow, what a personalized experience? You would, right? And so they've personalized they've converted a job to an experience and an interaction that is personalized. And so I think it has always existed, frankly. I think it's getting turbocharged and for right and maybe wrong reasons with the advent of AI and more data about individuals, right? And now the plumber is getting, in that example, not just any chocolate, but he's getting the chocolate that you like at that time of the day, and that goes well with the coffee that you have on the counter. So I mean, that's where it's gone, but it has always been the case, in my opinion.
Yes, that's a great example. I remember being a paperboy many, many years ago and knowing how each of my customers preferred to have their tabloids or broadsheets delivered, so I would adjust accordingly to help deliver a personalized experience for them. I suppose that's quite similar. So, why is it then, guys, that artificial intelligence is allowing us to amplify personalization?
Yeah, it goes back to what Shubham was saying, right? In order to personalize this experience or the product, you need to know a lot about the consumer. And the more you know, the more personalized you can make that experience or product, right? And what artificial intelligence helps you do is collect a lot more dimensions about what the consumer is, right? Or the behaviors, their likes, dislikes, where they live, how they, and in your paper route, what kind of the how do you quantify those experiences? So artificial intelligence is just making it easier for someone to create personalized experiences with a lot more dimensions. So you can create a extremely personalized experience because you have a lot more data points that can be analyzed much more efficiently, right, than before, possibly.
So, are we saying then that personalization is all about creating an experience, ecosystem, or set of choices for somebody based on their likes?
And maybe a different way to think about this is really more of a value exchange with two objectives, right? The customer is looking for an experience and they're getting certain values, and the value with the personalized experience is higher happiness, higher satisfaction, whatever. The on the other side, the person providing that experience is getting value in the sense they're going to get higher revenue, higher sales, higher long-term engagement. So there is value in both sides that's being created with this experience. So it's personalization is just making that value exchange more efficient in many ways, right? So it's and you can argue whether it's catering to someone's immediate likes or dislikes, where the value exchange can be short term. So the value you gain could be a short term engagement, could be immediate sale, or could be much more long term, where you're instilling some brand awareness, brand loyalty, and something which is much more doesn't have immediate economic benefit possibly, but on the longer term it could have some benefit, right? So it's a combination of how do you create this value exchange in an efficient way for both parties.
So I like that definition. So what you're saying is the act of personalizing implies a higher level of value exchange than not. And so in my plumber example, if the plumber just brought any bar of chocolates versus the one that Tarv likes, and that's where the value is higher. I mean, there's value in him or her bringing a bar of chocolates. But I think the value of that personalized lens is much higher, always should be higher.
Right.
Otherwise,
right. Yes.
Yeah.
So, the personalization we've been talking about is around consumers and businesses because we're talking about selling something to a customer that we know. Is that because that's where the biggest advantage is now using personalization within businesses to be able to attract customers, to either increase sales or grow brand loyalty? You mentioned how the plumber being able to know the type of chocolate I like any time of day, but is there also a watch out as well? I mean, if I just try and touch a little bit on the bias part of knowing me too much, and I'd be really happy at first about the plumber knowing the chocolate that I like, but I may also get a little bit freaked out that he knows exactly what I like, when I like, and how I like.
Yeah. I think there's a point at which that value exchange grows and grows and then grows into the creepy side of, and then reduces obviously as a result. I mean, it reminds me of this thing in animation, right? The uncanny valley, where, if the animation is too human-like, it
Right.
goes into the creepy side of,
Yeah.
the experience. And so maybe there is, if you over personalize, then the value actually erodes as opposed to increasing.
And it also goes back to this idea of something which is over personalized does not expose the consumer to varied experiences, right? So you may tend to get the same personalized experience again and again. So at some point, you want variety, you want to experience things that you're not familiar with, to maximize your happiness or satisfaction in any way. So it has to be a degree of balance between being too creepy and giving you exactly what you want, or surprising you with something that you haven't thought about, right? So it's uh, and that's how probably you should think about personalization. Is it's an element of surprise that should also be balanced with making sure your experience is extremely personalized.
Tarv, I do want to go back to your point on you brought the element of businesses and how businesses should think about personalization, right? And Rajiv, back to your point on value exchange, it's very clear on the value to the consumer, right? I think, Tarv, if it's okay, we should talk about the value to the business as well, right? Um, because there are some nuances there. So, as an example, if I have a loyal consumer and I give them more of what they've always bought from me, you could argue that on a very naive level, it is personalizing because I know what they like. But from a business ROI standpoint, they would have bought that thing from me anyway.
Yeah.
And so there is a design element to personalization so that the value equation is balanced, so that the person providing that experience, a product or service, also benefits through the right personalization. I don't know, Rajiv, if you have
Yeah, and
any
I
point
agree
of view
exactly,
there.
because which is why I think when you're offering an experience, it has to be, or a product, it has to offer a variety of experiences, some which are personalized, mixed in with something that's not, that is an element of surprise. So in your example of an extremely loyal customer, giving them something they always want, that's what you should do, because that incentivizes them to buy a product. At the same time, they would have bought that anyhow. So perhaps you incentivize them to buy that product, in exchange ask them to try something else, because that is a way for you to explore their expand their horizon as to what else they may possibly like, or like to experience. In exchange, they're getting something they think that is personalized, and the consumer still gets something they like. So I think constructing personalization schemes where the consumer gets what they want, at the same time the business is exploring other ways of providing the same service, right? In a different way. So I think that's way to think about it is, don't offer just always exactly what they want, but condition that probably based on something that you probably want them to explore, right?
In previous episodes, we talked about recommendation systems, and in another episode, we talked about user experience. We touched on this a little bit about exploitation and exploration, and this whole generalization that actually, being humans, anything that we love is amazing, but too much of it, we can become sick of it very, very quickly. So, back to the point about the business and being able to think about personalization in a way and recommend things to consumers we know that they like, which they were going to buy anyway. Is there also a risk that if we are only recommending things to them that we know they're going to buy, that they could potentially eventually become sick of that? And also, if we only recommend to consumers things that they like, there must be some link to ROI there as well. As I'm also delighted the first time you get it right, but if you keep offering me the same thing every single day, I'm eventually going to become not as interested or not as engaged.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. So back to the construct of value exchange. If you offer somebody something that they like and that they might have bought from you anyway, the value exchange does get into an imbalanced situation where I'm losing money on that consumer, right? Because they would have bought it anyway, and there's a cost to, giving an offer to them that is personalized. And so, yes, I think we should think a little bit more about maybe there's another incremental kind of change in the element of personalization. So the element of surprise that Rajiv you talked about and delight. I think there is an element of surprise and delight in personalization that really best in class teams that do personalization engineer. And I think that's something that we should augment the definition with, because personalization is not just about giving you what you what you want or what you told me you like. It's also about that surprise and delight as you build on that relationship, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think that goes back to, I think, Tar, in one of your earlier episodes, you talked about personalization of songs using Pandora and Spotify. I think that was the example you had given. That's a great example of, and that's where you talked about exploitation and exploration as well. I think that's the example where we can think about where you always want to listen to songs that you're comfortable with, that you like listening to, which Pandora or Spotify might recommend. But you do want that. You want to explore new music. You want to be able to explore new sounds, and doing that in a creative way is where I think the magic would really happen. Is how do you do that in a effective way? Is I think the question I would ask, and I think in one of the other episodes you talked about carpool karaoke. Maybe that's, and you talked about how that could be a different way of exploring how to present new content to it in a creative way, right? So it forces you to explore new ideas, new themes, right? So in a personalized experience. So I don't know. There's goes
Can
back to
you,
what Shubham was.
yeah. So Rajiv, I didn't understand the reference to carpool karaoke. Can you talk a little bit more
Yeah,
about that? Yeah, what do you
yeah.
mean
So
by in the
I
context of
was
personalization?
as I was thinking, if you think about Pandora, let's take Pandora as an example. I may like classic rock all the time, so I'm listening to classic rock channels all the time. So on Carpool, I may never listen to some other genre of music. Maybe I never listen to Harry Styles, let's say. But on Carpool, but I like Carpool Karaoke because I like the way James Corden presents his TV show. So on one week in Carpool Karaoke, maybe he's got the Beatles on, Paul McCartney's on, and I love the show and I watch the show. And I watch the same show the next week and Harry Styles is on. And I may have never listened to Harry Styles otherwise, but because I like the show and because I like the way James Corden presents it, I'm more likely to now go back and listen to Harry Styles in my playlist because I like some of the songs he's presented. So and then it's not because I didn't want to listen to Harry Styles before, but now I can listen to Harry Styles songs in carpool karaoke context where it's presented in a way that's, the experience is more. I make it's a way for me to explore new music in an environment which is presented creatively, the creative content. So when you're forcing your consumers to explore new ideas or new themes, you have to present that idea in a much more creative way. Otherwise, it becomes difficult to budge people from what they always want to do, right? So that was the example I was
Correct.
going.
So what you're saying is offering something to someone we know they like too much can also be dangerous, as we have to also surprise and delight them. But it's also about the experience because there's a risk you may try to surprise and delight them but get it totally wrong.
That's exactly right. Because if I hear on the Pandora may have a 20% exploration algorithm built in, where they may be presenting a new song, and I may just skip over that song because I don't want to listen to it, right? Because it's not presented in a way that I like. On the other hand, so the experience of how you listen to new content, that's where the creativity definitely comes in, the human element comes in on how to curate that creative present that idea. So going back to, if you want to if you're an online business and you want to expose your consumer to new kinds of products, you have to, the creative content of how you deliver that new content will go a long way in determining whether the consumer is going to end up choosing that product, right? So it's not just that you show them choices, the choices have to be presented in a very creative way.
I think what we're also touching upon, Tarv and Rajiv, from hearing you guys, is the limitation of personalization. So personalization alone doesn't guarantee the longevity of the relationship that your product or consumer or service has with the consumer, right? Because in this
Yes.
example, if James Corden were to rely on things that people liked alone, he would never bring Harry Styles on, right? If his
Right.
cohort was Paul McCartney and Beatles fans, but he does engineer longevity of his audience by bringing in things that they might be surprised and delighted by. So I think this is almost, we're talking about the flip side of over personalization and how to avoid that by
Yes.
bringing in some of the explore elements as opposed to just exploit elements into the mix, right?
Right, right, exactly right. And the explore elements have to be this. That's where the creativity is really key, because just engineering exploration using random sampling or randomly showing you new things might not work, because unless it's shown in a way that something else interests you. So
So explore is adjacent to what you personalize, or what you know about somebody, right? So basically, when you present an explore option, it has to be close to the personalized offer,
yes,
right?
or it
Or
has to be
adjacent to,
close.
yeah.
Some other dimension of the exploration has to be close to the consumer, right? So in James Gordon's example, a lot of people like his TV show, right? So that's why you watch it. So perhaps so which is why, for example, everyone advertises in the Super Bowl, because everyone watches the Super Bowl. So it's a great place for you to show new advertisements, and they try to gain new consumers, right? So it's a way, when you think about advertising too, how do you reach a much broader audience using a concept or a theme which is where you are able to explore, allow the consumer to explore, right? So that's the reach is much higher with a much more creative way of thinking about presenting that idea, right?
Sticking with companies then, it's also around what the company's objective is, surely, with that personalization effort. Are they trying to generate more sales, or are they trying to create brand loyalty or growth? And then there's this different, way you can achieve that as well in terms of the medium you use to track the consumer, surely.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point. When is personalization most effective, right? Do you go to a Facebook and use their algorithms to personalize a first time consumer, or do you use personalization for repeat, or consumers that are slightly more loyal than never bought before? I think that's a interesting question to discuss, right? When to use personalization? Do you use it for just reach with consumers that have never bought products? Because then you're dependent on, the cost of doing that is extremely high, right? Because you're dependent on Facebook to do that personalization in that example.
Yeah, and I think, do you offer it to everyone, or do you offer it to a more focused audience? And I think the answer is really a combination. But I think if if you're looking for short-term profit or economic profit, right? There's always a tendency to over-personalize, because there's always a belief that, and it's true that there's until you reach that point where it starts to become creepy, there may be a long run before, when you start to personalize things, you may see incremental sales, incremental experiences. So the businesses will benefit from over personalizing in the short term, right? So, but then it may negatively impact what your long term prospects are with the same consumer, if the experience becomes worse. So there has to be a balance where you balance your short term propensity or economic profit for possibly more brand loyalty, brand experience over the longer term, right? So I think, so if you can't exploit someone too much too quickly, because then it'll result in some longer term loss, right? So that's the analogy I would give.
So, guys, what are we saying when it comes to businesses and personalization towards consumers? Are businesses going for short term sales or long term brand loyalty? Or is it both?
It can be both, but it has to be creatively thought about. How do you balance the two, right? Because the longer term objective, how do you maintain that longer term engagement and brand loyalty? It's very difficult to engineer easily using simple personalization algorithms, because the simplest way of personalizing will always tell you to offer the consumer what you think there's a high likelihood they're going to buy, right? And that is something that they have already bought in the past. So if you just use historical behaviors as your guide, then you're likely to not to explore new spaces, right? So you tend to get biased towards one way of thinking about the consumer. So you have to consciously look at how we can eliminate that bias by looking at longer term prospects of how to exploit that, how to improve the value to the consumer over the longer period of time, right?
I think, my view is I just thought of this, but basically, if you're trying to attract new consumers to your product or to the category, I think you can still use personalization. Obviously, there are two ways to use personalization. One is you go to a platform that has more information about the consumer than you do because it's an existing consumer of theirs, like Facebook, or you do contextual personalization. So what I mean by that is, if you're putting money in display, you personalize the ads in context. And so you say, hey, if I'm talking about pet food, let's say in our business, I'm going to personalize ads to the shelter sites by talking about new adoption and what you need to know when you get a new puppy home or a new dog home, as an example. And so it's a contextual personalized ad, and I think that may be most cost effective in the absence of any other knowledge about the consumer. And then as you get into richer consumer equations and experiences and your own history with consumers, you can get into more and more of the product personalization, not just the contextual personalization of a generic product, right? So the way you personalize varies.
Shubham talked about platform and display in the pet example. Would these be towards short-term sales or towards long-term brand loyalty and growth? And what I'm getting at is, when we talk about exploration and exploitation in personalization, what's the right balance?
Yeah, I think, and that's the point that Rajiv is making. Basically, you have to build almost like a P&L or a value equation for every consumer effectively, and where you're balancing out the short term and long term, and explore and exploit, in that value equation. So it's almost like, you need to build an engine for personalization that takes into account these multiple, value levers, right? And then it optimizes and maximizes the value.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I mean, I think going back, I was elaborating on one thing Shubham said, because the way to think about personalization, if I want to restate what he was saying, is one way you can personalize is when you say contextual, is product A is similar to product B. You like product A, I'm going to offer you product B. That seems less creepy because there's nothing about you, right? It's just that, hey, you like this shirt, you may like some other shirt. So that's if you don't know anything about the consumer, that's what you would do, because they've never bought anything. They decide to buy one product, then you offer them something similar. So there's a product similarity, which is completely based on some logic as to how these products are similar. The second one is, of course, purchasing behavior, saying, hey, customer A is similar to customer B. Customer A has bought something, so I'm going to offer this. So you need to know a lot about the customer. So, and then the end is, of course, you're combining this, because as you get to know your consumer more or customer more, then you know what they bought and who else has bought something similar. So, and then the personalization becomes much more intimate, right? And then that's when you may start to see more exploitation. But I think there's still a balance, because exploration happens because past behavior is not always a predictor of what you want to do in the future. So you have to somewhat, and machine learning is great in learning from the past, but it's not good at anticipating what else could be the possibility in the future, right? So there has to be an element of experimentation, creativity, as well as to consciously eliminate that bias from machine learning or AI, right?
No, I was just thinking about what that engine could look like, right? So basically, you have the concepts we've discussed so far, right? Are, you can personalize through a choice architecture as well that you create for the consumer to then choose from to make a personalized experience themselves, where you don't know anything about the consumer, but you you know enough about your consumers to figure out what choices to offer them to combine and mix and match. So there's
Right.
that piece. There is the contextual piece, which where the product similarity conversation comes in, which is, you buy peanut butter, I should maybe sell you bread as well, right? And then
Right.
there is the purchase behavior piece, which is, based on all of that. And then there's the experimentation piece. So my head, there's almost these four pieces that you need to optimize to get consumers to come back again and again with you. And that's really the nature of a personalization engine, if you will, of the future.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
Okay, so let me think about this. I'm the consumer, and there's a company, and the company knows exactly what I like, but also knows offering me only what I like will eventually mean that I may get sick or fed up with those recommendations. So therefore, it tries to also surprise and delight me with things that I may like. That's the exploration. So we've got the exploitation of what I like and the exploration of what I might like. Now let's relate that to a tree. If you think about balance, an apple tree, for example, the apples on the tree can be thought of as the exploration, the things that will surprise and delight me. And something that I already like, the exploitation, we can think of as the roots of the tree that need to be watered for the apples to grow. What we're saying is actually you need the right balance, because if you continue to surprise and delight me and not actually give me something that I like as part of the experience, the apples will run out. But if you give me a balance of what I like, but also surprise and delight me, the tree will continue to grow, and then at the same time, I'll also continue to eat apples. Yeah, another real example recently of when exploitation's gone wrong is when I decided to do some gardening after getting seriously harassed by my other half, and I purchased some gardening tools such as a spade, and then Amazon decided to offer me a spade again and again and again for the next month. Every single time I went on there as a recommendation. Now, I've bought the spade. I don't have a hobby of collecting spades, so therefore in that instance they've got it really wrong.
Yeah. I think there is no mathematical formula for what the right mix is. This is where human creativity comes in, which is why AI cannot give you the answer as to what the right mix is. He can tell you how to experiment with it and tell you which experiment works, which one doesn't. So you almost have to experiment with different mixes and figure out through other means, what the optimal way to do this is, right? So it's how did James Corden come up with the show? We don't know. How did he think of presenting it in that way? Because can you be the equivalent of James Corden for every personalized experience? Then I think that's the answer, right? So, but there's a creative element to it, which is not mathematically, right?
Yeah, I think personalization overall as a concept is just one tool in that arsenal, like Rajiv is saying, right? I mean, you have to blend in the human ingenuity, creativity, the choices that you're offering consumers, the types of personalization, and all of that basically leads to consumers wanting to come back again and again to your product or service. And so it's not the answer for everything, personalization, that is, but you have to kind of combine that with all these other elements to ultimately do what you want to do, which is increase lifetime value of your consumers, make sure consumers come back, increase earned kind of media, reduce the cost of new acquisition, etc., etc. Personalization is not the panacea for all of the above. It is one of the tools in your arsenal.
So as a reminder, our subject today is personalization and how we can remove bias from personalization. So is it right to say, and please push back if that's not what we're saying, but you need the human element to remove the bias from the machine that could potentially be created by the machine to create the best experience. So you need the human and machine mix to remove the bias from personalization.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. And the human element also lends governance, helps set policies and guardrails for the machine to optimize within, right? And injects creativity, whether it's of choices or ideas or exploration options. So the human element is all of these areas. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think this is and the human element is important, especially if there are other examples where this bias can creep in other fields. You can think about insurance, for example, where people are given the best insurance policies or loans, for example, or if you look at machine learning, it will tend to recommend who has been a good loan risk or insurance risk based on history. That may effectively shut out some minorities or some certain segment of the population. So there has to be human intervention to say that we have to make it more fair or equitable, right? So otherwise, the only way to eliminate bias is through this human intervention, I believe. So, and it has to happen in a conscious way, right?
So what are the top advantages or disadvantages then of being able to engineer personalization without bias?
If you engineering without bias, I think, like we said, it will, if done well, will theoretically give you a longer term customer loyalty, longer term brand equity. And more importantly, I think it'll also enrich the customer's experience to a larger extent over a longer period of time, right? So I think the customer is also getting more value over longer periods of time. So both parties are benefiting over a longer time horizon. So that's the reason why you have to consciously think about eliminating bias, right?
And as I said, I mean, personalization doesn't solve for everything when it comes to longevity in consumer relationships. But it is obviously, to the extent you can eliminate bias, one of the key tools that are in use today. So, yeah.
Final question. Looking to the future, how do you see companies adopting the use of personalization from the point of view of what some of the things we've talked about today will mean, excluding bias, and what can people watching think about seeing in the future?
Yeah, so I can maybe talk about a radical idea. I think companies of the future will look quite different than companies today in how they work with consumers. And I think the way that consumers interact with companies is still very one-sided, right? But I think in the future, consumers will have a bigger say in every aspect of what a company does, not just its purpose and its sustainability goals, etc. And personalization is part of that. So I expect future generations of personalization solutions to include consumers more explicitly. Today, Amazon includes them implicitly when Rajiv talks about product similarity or consumer similarity algorithms. Consumers are participating implicitly, not explicitly. And I just think in the future, consumers may be much more vocal about what personalization means for them and how others may benefit, and maybe even get a cut out of a new personalization strategy.
Yeah, I agree, Shubham. I think I think, like you said, I think one of the reasons there's an increased focus on privacy too, which is going to drive this change. And that also means that this exchange is not going to be one-sided. So because of the fact that we collectively benefit from sharing information. So I think, and if there's a collective economic benefit, I think that can benefit both the consumer and the businesses, right, together. And some, we can talk about in some other talks, emerging themes such as distributed ledgers, blockchain will enable us to implement these in a much more distributed way, right? It's a much more equitable distribution of these economic benefits.
Yeah, I mean, companies are already experimenting with, hey, if I'm checking yes on accept all cookies, what do I get in return?
Yes.
Monetarily. I mean, I get a better service, more personalization, but what's in it for me? And making it more explicit if it's a discount or if it's a payment, because you may then sell or leverage my information to inform your algorithms or even sell my information elsewhere. So, there are companies that are figuring out how to use blockchain and crypto and micropayments to actually make that transaction much more explicit monetarily. And I think that's another interesting dimension of the future of personalization.
Yeah, I agree. That's a great idea because currently there are a lot of people who get paid to be on Nielsen panels to report what they watch, the viewing habits are, and having that model kind of distributed so everyone can participate. Because increasingly, if you can make it feasible in a digital world, absolutely that makes sense. Yeah, that's that is the future.
Guys, we've had an amazing conversation, gone off in different directions. We could have gone in many, many other directions. So thank you very much. Any final words or comments for everybody watching?
No, thanks, Tav. Firstly, thanks for having me, and this is a great discussion, and I think got me thinking about some of the personalized experiences I see every day, and then I think firstly it's going to make me more aware and conscious now that we have talked about it. So I'm hoping that this is going to initiate a lot of dialogue and more conversations on this, because I think this, as Shubham was saying, this is the way of the future, and this is going to change. So I'm excited to see how this changes and probably benefit consumers and businesses equally in the long term.
Yeah, thanks, Tar, for having me and having us. And great discussion. My only disappointment is that it has been a lot more civil than our usual discussion. We didn't get into the kind of nice arguments that we usually do. So hopefully more fireworks in one of your subsequent sessions.
And maybe next time we can talk about the debate we talked about last time, Tar, where this online debate between Byron Sharp and Ritson on whether perception drives behavior or behavior drives perception. That's a completely new topic we can explore. Yeah,
that's a good one.
Yeah. And I think for some reason, the record button has been added as an extra layer of niceness between us all, and actually avoided any healthy debate as we normally have. But I'm sure there'll be many more chances of that in future episodes. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tar.
Wow, what an amazing 10th episode. If you want to send us your questions, comments, suggestions or ideas, or even be part of a future episode, please email tav@plaintalks.co.uk. Next time you're buying something or watching any content, have a think if you're experiencing any personalization because of artificial intelligence, and whether it's biased or not. Loads more still to come with many more guests. Plain Talks, episode 10 done. From myself and my amazing guests, Shubham and Rajiv, we'll see you all next time.